Welcome to the Crypto Nation, folks. As we wrap up this year's Swell Conference, it feels fitting to step back and reflect on just how far this technology and this community has come. But more importantly, it's the perfect moment to talk about what's unfolding right now in the global economy, why liquidity is becoming the most valuable commodity in finance, and why XRP is positioned to benefit from that shift more than almost any other digital asset in existence. For years, people have looked at XRP and seen only a cryptocurrency, one more token on an exchange, something to trade, watch, or speculate on. But that view misses the entire purpose of XRP's design. It isn't simply a coin to buy low and sell high. It isn't meant to behave like a speculative stock. XRP was engineered to be a universal liquidity bridge, a digital conduit for transferring trillions of dollars across borders, across markets, and across asset classes with unparalleled efficiency. When you look at it through that lens, the discussion around XRP's price becomes much less emotional and far more mathematical. Once you understand how liquidity works in a global financial system and how scarce optimized liquidity actually is, the idea of XRP reaching dramatically higher valuations stops sounding like fantasy and starts looking like inevitability. Recent developments have shown that fractionalization is the foundation of high-value utility, and one of XRP's most influential design features is its extreme divisibility. Each XRP can be split into 1 million units, known as drops. Most people underestimate how important this is. Let's imagine a world where XRP rises to $10,000. At that price, a single drop would still be just 1 cent. That means you could buy a coffee with a tiny slice of a drop and still settle multi-million-dollar transfers using only a modest number of XRP. XRP's fractionalization ensures that as its value increases, its usability improves, rather than decreasing like it would with high-priced assets such as gold, Bitcoin, or even equities. This is why XRP's price can scale into high territory while still remaining practical for everyday payments, microtransactions, and institutional settlements simultaneously. Liquidity efficiency is why a higher price makes XRP better. Liquidity is the bloodline of any financial system. It is the oxygen that allows value to move, markets to function, and settlements to finalize. And this is where XRP shines brightest. Most people misunderstand liquidity. They think more tokens equal more liquidity. But what truly matters is how much value each token can carry. Let's use a simple comparison. At $1 per XRP, a $1 billion cross-border payment requires 1 billion XRP. At $10,000 per XRP, that same 1 billion transfer requires only 100,000 XRP. That difference is transformative. A higher XRP price creates lower slippage, fewer tokens are moved, meaning less market disruption. Lower volatility. With fewer units in motion, the network becomes more stable. Faster finality. Moving a smaller quantity allows institutions to complete settlements even more quickly. In other words, rising XRP prices increase network efficiency, which is the opposite of what happens in most markets. Bitcoin becomes harder to use as its price rises because its divisibility and speed become limiting factors. XRP becomes more effective. This is why a future with more global liquidity doesn't dilute XRP, it amplifies it. Global liquidity is expanding, and XRP was built for this era. We're entering a period where global liquidity demands are skyrocketing. Central banks are injecting capital into financial systems. Tokenization of assets is expanding rapidly. Cross-border payments are growing. And the world is moving toward real-time settlement across currencies and markets. Financial institutions desperately need a bridge asset capable of absorbing and transporting unprecedented liquidity volumes without destabilizing markets. With only 100 billion XRP ever created, no more, its supply is permanently capped. That scarcity, combined with rising demand for efficient settlement liquidity, is the heart of XRP's long-term valuation model. Let's put this into perspective. The foreign exchange market, on its own, moves $7 trillion per day. Derivative markets exceed $700 trillion. Global cross-border payments total roughly $150 trillion per year. If XRP captured even 1% of annual cross-border settlements, around $1.5 trillion, and only 25 billion XRP were actively circulating for liquidity, each XRP would need to represent $60,000 in bridged value. This is not speculation. It is simple supply and demand mathematics in a global liquidity context. Since institutional adoption is the quiet engine behind XRP's future, retail investors often focus on hype, headlines, and price predictions. But the real momentum behind XRP is institutional. Banks, central banks, payment providers, and market makers don't think in terms of tokens. They think in terms of liquidity efficiency, settlement speed, and regulatory clarity. And the world's major players are already testing, integrating, and preparing to use technologies like the XRP ledger to move tokenized assets, currencies, and collateral. As more liquidity enters the system, whether through new monetary policies, increased tokenization, or growing cross-border payment flows, the assets that act as liquidity bridges stand to benefit the most. XRP is uniquely positioned here because it was designed from the start to handle this type of high-value, high-velocity throughput. We know that utility, not speculation, drives long-term value. XRP's entire architecture was built around the idea that velocity, demand, and liquidity flow, not retail speculation, would be the true drivers of its price. Its role is not to serve as a speculative coin, but as a core component of global financial infrastructure. And that's exactly where the world is heading. As we move toward an economy where trillions of dollars flow across tokenized networks, the need for a fast, deeply divisible, highly efficient bridge asset becomes undeniable. XRP's value comes from this role. The more liquidity the world needs, the more value XRP must represent. Looking back at the early days of Swell, when Ripple wasn't even allowed to attend certain industry events, the contrast with today is almost unbelievable. Major financial institutions now attend Swell as partners, collaborators, and innovators. Blockchain, crypto, and digital liquidity are no longer fringe. They're becoming foundational. And yet, despite the progress, we're still at the beginning. The global liquidity expansion we are entering is unlike any previous cycle. Tokenization is accelerating. Regulatory clarity is approaching. Settlement systems are converging, and the demand for instant, efficient movement of value is growing exponentially. XRP was engineered for this world. When you take everything into account, fractionalization, liquidity efficiency, capped supply, global financial demand, and institutional adoption, you arrive at a simple conclusion. A high XRP price isn't optional. It's required. It must rise to meet global liquidity needs. It must scale to represent trillions in value. It must function across both micro and macro transactions. The design makes that possible. The math makes it necessary. And the growing liquidity environment makes it increasingly inevitable. So whether it's $10,000, $50,000 or more, XRP's future valuation isn't about fantasy or hype. It's about the mathematics of liquidity in a globalized, tokenized financial system that is expanding faster than ever. As another Swell event comes to an end, the message is clear. We are witnessing the reinvention of financial infrastructure in real time. The work is far from finished, but the progress is undeniable. Ripple continues to lead with transparency, compliance, and innovation, and the entire XRP community is part of that momentum. If you want to understand the future of global finance, you must understand the role liquidity plays and why XRP is built to meet the demands of an economy that is rewiring itself around real-time value movement. Thank you for being part of this journey. The next chapter is just beginning.